Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I move that this House calls on the McGowan Government to urgently address social and infrastructure issues in Newman to restore community confidence and safety. And the Nationals bring this MPI to the House today because this is an issue that has been drawn to our attention by the community of Newman, and I don't think it's over-egging it to say that this is a community that's on the brink of crisis. There's some very serious issues that need to be addressed, and they have been asking for assistance from the government to rectify this, and at present those calls are falling on deaf ears. And so today we would like to take the opportunity to outline some of those issues, to call on the Premier and his Cabinet to take the issues that are being raised with them seriously and explain to the community of Newman what they are going to do to make sure that that community can continue to grow and thrive. I wanted to start the debate with a rhetorical question in terms of who has been to Newman, because I'm sure the Premier and many of his ministers have been there, and Sorry? Yeah, no.
Yeah, but I also, you get called to order.
Well, you don't think I'm silly enough to ask a rhetorical question about who's been to Newman if I'm not confident that my members have been member for Pilbara, do you? So sit back there and listen, because I tell you, they're not very happy with you.
Through the Chair, member for Pilbara, last warning.
It wasn't an aggressive question. I was actually just saying it's a beautiful part of the world, and Newman has always been known for being a very welcoming and pleasant town to visit. And I know that many members in this place will visit it from time to time as ministers, opposition and the like. It is a very important cog in the wheel of the state's economy and also in the nation's economy. It generates a significant amount of revenue for our state, and I don't think it's too much for them to ask for some support when they need it from the government of the day. Obviously, there is also a very big employer in town that has a significant impact on that community, and that would be BHP. They are an employer and also a significant property owner in that community, and their members and their employees are part of the community, those that are based up there residentially. So there is an issue there, I guess, where there are two very significant players in that community, both the government and BHP as a key stakeholder, that can have a serious impact on the outcome and where this is at the moment. If you hadn't been to Newman and you visited and you were planning to visit, Mr Speaker, you would have a bit of a Google, as you do, and what would come up, and I did this morning, would be descriptions like Newman, the largest inland town in the Pilbara. It's a modern, attractive mining town in the heart of the, I'm going to say this wrong, Ophthalmia Ranges. And if you scroll down, they'll give you a whole list of things to do and see while you're in Newman. And Radio Hill Lookout, for those that haven't been, beautiful views, particularly in the afternoon, and views of the mine. They go on to talk about the Matamili and the East Pilbara Arts Centre, which is a jewel in the crown for the Pilbara. It's a fantastic facility, quite unique in the sense that not only exhibiting internationally renowned artists, but also you can meet with those artists as they work. They are from Newman and from the surrounding lands, and it's a beautiful, beautiful centre that the community uses for a whole raft of different reasons. Supported, I might say, Mr Speaker, by Royalties for Regions by the previous government, and very well and much loved by the community. If you go down further, there's attractions further afield. It's the gateway to an amazing part of our state. What you won't find, but is widely acknowledged by the local community and amongst those that have visited, and is as plain as the nose on my face, Mr Speaker, is the fact that there are sections of the town that the locals now call East Timor or liken to a war zone. There are sections of that town that are simply disgraceful. And I was shocked when I visited with my colleague, the Honourable Jackie Boydell, member for the Mining and Pastoral Region, to see how badly some of those sections of this beautiful town had disintegrated. And there is a reason for that. And the community is aware of those reasons. They know what is driving some of these very poor outcomes. It is disappointing, Mr Speaker, that there has been no acknowledgement from government or the biggest employer in town that there are sections of this community that look like a war zone, and that there are complex issues that they need to deal with, that they need support to deal with. And we do bring BHP into this argument because they are a big property owner and they are an employer in town, and they can make a real difference if they chose to change some of their practices in that community. And it would be remiss of me to point out that whilst we have big advertising campaigns from the likes of BHP saying we think big and we deliver this much, it is in stark contrast to the reality that many residents in Newman are living at this moment. Mr Speaker, I premise all these remarks by the fact that the community desires to actually take action. They want to be proactive. They want to deal positively with some of the situations that they are faced with today. But what they are challenged with is that they are getting very little traction with those that they have raised it with within government, and they are frustrated by some of the policies that BHP as a property owner and a landowner in the community have. So Newman residents and their community leaders know that there is a positive future for Newman, and there are some great things to do and visit, and certainly there are people that have called it home for a long time, but they're asking for some help. They're asking for some help, and they're trying to prevent the crisis from moving on any further. And I think that Newman is crying out for help, Mr Speaker. As I said, my colleague, the member for Mining and Pastoral Region, Jackie Boydell, and I visited the town. It was early April, and we were shocked. It was very confronting. You drive down streets with the Shire's CEO and you see house after house after house boarded up in amongst empty blocks with burnt-out car bodies. There was graffiti, vandalism, and that was interspersed with what was obviously social housing that seemed overcrowded and in a poor state of affairs. The numbers that we were provided are damning. Some 500 homes in Newman vacant. 106, that's about 20% of the housing stock in a community. So that's going to have an impact, Mr Speaker, in any community.
Members,
when you see that percentage,
go outside, please.
When you see that many houses and that percentage of the town's entire housing stock vacant and unused. 160, Mr Speaker, of these houses were boarded up, and they are BHP-owned housing stock. And some of them have been boarded up for more than 2 years, and probably longer than that. And there are some streets... There are some streets, Mr Speaker, when you will go down and there will be boarded up house, boarded up house, boarded up house, and one lone residence surrounded by a plethora of empty houses. It's not a community. That's not a community. That is not what people that live in Newman want to be living in. And of course, with those empty houses comes the associated social problems. And it would be no surprise to anyone in this House that if you overlaid the areas where the police are called to most frequently, it is in direct correlation with the areas where there are the highest numbers of vacant houses and areas, particularly in East Newman. So from what I'm told, there is a correlation. And it would be interesting for the Police Minister or others to comment in relation to that, because there's some very easy policy strings that can be pulled in relation to that, and also in conversation with BHP around how they manage that empty housing stock, Mr Speaker. I wanted to refer to an article that was written by Rebecca Parrish in the ABC Northwest, and a section of it where they spoke to some of the residents who have been impacted by this behaviour. And the subheading of this article, which was from the 24th of April in 2019, is Residents Fed Up. And I quote, "Doc Davey owns one of the worst damaged properties in Newman, a home he bought as part of his retirement plan. We had leased it out to the police for 5 years and they then vacated because of the problems that were emanating from that area. Straight after they left, within 3 months, the damage started," Mr Davies said. "We rebuilt the back fence 6 times, the damage just kept on coming. It is a basket case and we just haven't been able to get on top of it. It's worse than third world." Lucianne Tacona lives in a home surrounded by vacant properties. Recently, one of the 6 properties boarded up to the rear of her house was also used by numerous people for squatting. She said she would feel safer if people were actually living in the homes. "All of the houses around us have been empty for the 2 years we've been here," Ms Tacona said. "It's not much of a community neighbourhood. We need people living in the houses. You've got so much FIFO, but I don't know why when there are people here that needs jobs. It's like a transient town, isn't it?" Well, that just says it all to me. There were comments in that article and another in the West Australian from the police, from the local government. They all concur that the town is crying out for help and that there are things that need to be done. And like I said, Mr Speaker, they have attempted to raise these concerns with government, and they've also offered some potential solutions. They are aware that you can't just come to government and moan and point out the problems, that it's always helpful to offer some solutions. And as yet, there's been no response to their knowledge or in any meaningful way to those solutions. So I say to the Premier, without over-egging the situation, that I feel that there's similarities here in Newman as there were with Kalgoorlie and the situation that we were dealing with a couple of years ago. All of the precursors that are present up there, that without swift and proactive action could well be leading to something that will be far worse if it's not dealt with very soon. There's antisocial behaviour, there's vandalism, there's a perception and a reality of rising crime. It's draining police resources, which they acknowledge part of their role, but would have publicly stated in media interviews that it is a challenge for them to manage that. There is alcohol consumption mixed with juvenile crime, and one of the issues they talk about is overcrowding in social housing, which is obviously leading to some of these more complex issues, particularly with the kids as well. The Shire said to us that there are no senior government employees in the community. And you will recall, Mr Speaker, that this was an issue in Kalgoorlie as well. They called out to have someone senior to coordinate government agency responses right across the board. And that is one of the solutions or issues that they have raised with government that they would like to see actioned, that they just need some support. All of their government agencies, the people that they report to, are based in Port Hedland, which is some way away from Newman, and so there are some very serious issues that need to be dealt with. It would be viewed very positively if they could have someone senior to coordinate some of those responses. A high level officer to be located in Newman to provide oversight and to coordinate any response that might be developed with the stakeholder. Whoa, that's not right. These issues, Mr Speaker, are also being compounded by the transition that is underway from the town reserve and also some of the outlying communities. Now, I'm not going to dwell on that because that in itself is a very complex and challenging issue, but it is one that has been raised with us in relation to that community, and they are facing a changing demographic, and they want to be able to deal with it positively rather than trying to deal with the fallout of some of these issues that come with that changing demographic. And certainly they go back to always that overcrowding issue in the social housing, which is being exacerbated and causing flow-on problems. I think, Mr Speaker, that there is a potent mix in Newman at the moment. There is overcrowding in government housing. There are boarded up and vacant houses owned by BHP. There are crime hotspots that are correlating to those areas. There is a lack of senior decision makers based in the community, and those that are there are feeling helpless and are feeling like they have been neglected. The community feels they've been neglected. They feel they've been let down by BHP, and they are worried about their future. And so the Nationals bring this debate today to ask the government to intervene. And I ask the Premier, has the Police Minister briefed you on the issues that are occurring in this town? Has the Minister for Regional Development brought the concerns of the community to your attention that she has had interactions with? I understand that it has been the Minister for Regional Development that's been dealing with this issue predominantly. Has the Housing Minister advised you what the strategy is to deal with the overcrowding? And will you and your Lands Minister now take a much stronger line with BHP over their closure plans for Curra Village and their residential workforce? Because you must surely, Premier, agree that BHP's intention to transition workers into residential housing on a, and I quote, organic and voluntary basis is a weak and unacceptable response when you're dealing with an issue like this, where there are boarded up homes and no intention from that organisation, as far as we can see, to actually commit to making it a residential and normalised community. My understanding is that, and the member for Warren Blackwood would speak about this more in a moment, is that they are in the process of closing down Curra, which they were supposed to have done 2 years ago. They've purchased Caravan Park and another work camp within the community, and that is not normalising or incentivising workers to utilise that housing stock, which could fundamentally change that community. If you had 8 houses on a street all boarded up that were all of a sudden filled with employees coming and going, being serviced by cleaners and gardeners and all the rest of it, your dynamic in your community immediately changes. BHP has a responsibility here, and the Premier has a responsibility, and his government, to take a stronger line with this company. This is a community that can see directly the impact of BHP being allowed to do exactly as it wishes. And I will leave the member for Warren Blackwood to talk more about that and the impact of these fly-in, fly-out camps and the fly-in, fly-out approach that they are taking in a town like Newman. That can sustain a residential workforce. So the people that have invested, the people that are looking to make this their home, are being let down by the government at the moment, and it's not over-egging the fact that this is a serious, serious issue, and there are precursors and all of the right elements for this to become much worse. It is a tinderbox situation up there at the moment, and they would very much like to see some response from the government that gives them confidence that it is being taken seriously.